This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. And we'll try and calm down a bit for Ask a Rabbi.
So, yes, that was quite a hit. It even ended up with a little bit of parking lot discussion. Stuart, as he was heading out of Ask a Lawyer, and I was heading into Ask a Rabbi. So, I guess I'm going to talk about gender and transgender and orientation LGBTQ. And please, if you have any questions or comments, give me a call, 772-340-1590. And I'm going to start with just a couple of very basic premises. One, which is what I operate under, which is that God doesn't make junk, period. God makes us in God's image, which means whatever we are is exactly what God intended. It's not wrong. It's not damaged goods. It's not junk. It's a beautiful human being, period.
I get that.
With a God spark and entitled to being treated as a dignified human being. And, so, right, and as Stuart mentioned, for those who don't know, Stuart made a comment that I ascribe certain pronouns to people who are transgender, and that is far from the truth. I would never call somebody it. I don't even call my dog it. I find it hard to refer to animals as it. But when I write in my scholarly articles, and one is coming up to be hopefully published soon on LGBTQ, I use they, because that is the APA-approved pronoun for an individual without being gender specific, because it's considered to say he or she is a little too awkward in text. It actually
isn't they plural?
They is plural, but English is changing.
They is plural.
They is plural.
Okay. Yeah.
The word they is plural.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And the other point of that, though, right? When I say how are you, right? What I really should be saying is how art thou? Because thou is the singular second person. We stopped using it over 100 years ago and went to you.
I've never even heard of that. Okay.
Thou is that's why Buber's book is translated I, thou, because it's on a singular one-on-one relationship, I, thou. So, when you hear thou art this or thou art that, that is an older English. And for a number of reasons, it moved over to you. And so we're probably seeing something along those lines happening in the third person with the inclusion of they. So when I write something, I might say, a person is entitled to stand up if that's what they would like to do. Okay, so that's a perfectly grammatical correct sentence today. English is not a static language. It's not frozen. And the other reality of English is that people misuse it and abuse it beyond words all the time. I teach English. I teach English as a second language. And there are many things that just drive me up a wall. He gave the book to Sarah and I. No, he gave the book to Sarah and me. He gave the book to me. It's absolutely correct to say me, because that's the direct object pronoun. But you get myself and I and these really weird constructs that people put in English because they're afraid of saying me. Well, there are times that me is the right pronoun. I, me, And again, I teach it, so it just, what can I say? It's really funny because when I was in high school and in college, thank you, Tova, my friend, who corrected my English more times than I care to mention, but she she and a couple of other relatives and friends have moved me into hopefully a much better English structure, and I think that's helped my public speaking, and I know it's definitely helped my writing. My writing is still a work in progress and getting better. But the bottom line with this issue is that people are entitled, as Stewart said, to define their gender by how they feel. It's a right. And along with that is to say what pronouns they would like. Right? Each person is entitled to say what pronouns they would like to have. So there's another sentence just like that. That's my form of speech. It is much easier than saying he or she. And again, I would never use it for anything other than a toaster. Seldom for an animal. You're supposed to use it for a baby too. The baby, it is crying. But most babies have a
Really?
gender or a sex. Yeah. And sex and gender are different. Sex is, right, whether or not you have an X and no Y, or an X and a Y, or something other. Right? There are people with XXY and XYY. There are people with XXX. There are many, many permutations. There's even a 4X. Yeah, and they're called super females. And they tend to be very tall and skinny. You probably know a couple. Tend to be very tall and skinny women.
Wow.
And
4X.
4X.
I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, it's a certain condition. But people are not just X, Y, or XX. The bottom line is X alone. One X and a Y certainly is not viable. You need some combination of those particular strands in your DNA. But it's not cut and dry. And even if you're XY or XX, there's still a wide variety of other things going on in the body with testosterone and estrogen and all those things that happen in the womb and how they shape a baby. We're just beginning to learn. And we know that there are dramatic effects depending on what's going on in the mother. We know about teratogens, right? Thalidomide, as we talked about a previous session, right? It doesn't take much to affect a fetus during its development stage. And so we're just beginning to start to study what do all of these natural things that happen in a woman's womb do to the child. What does it do if she's stressed? What does it do if she gets sick? Lots and lots of questions and not a lot of answers yet. And so, people are entitled to describe how they feel. Now, I will go one step further and I will say that how gender is defined is a social construct of the society in which you live. For example, right? Here's one out of Israel. When I lived in Israel many years ago, bus drivers were a really cool profession for people to go into. It was considered an upper echelon job because they were well paid. And that was not true here in the U.S., right? So it's a social thing. Now, that's not gender, but that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. What is the role of women? Very, very varied, depending on the culture. If we look at ancient Japanese culture, the women ran the money. They were the financial
They do at this radio station, too.
I understand, and they do many places. And I would venture that in a good chunk of marriages, the woman manages the checkbook, and in other marriages, the husband. And in my marriage, it's gone back and forth, depending on who's got the time to run that part of the household and pay the bills and all that fun administrative nitty-gritty that's got to happen kind of stuff. And, so it varies. And there's 1,000 different ways. And the same is true with, what is it? So what is it that makes somebody feel female or male or masculine or feminine? Right? They're different. Right? Male or female is your sex assigned at birth based on your presentation. Now, what do you do with the people who present with 2 or present small or, some other than the standard binary image, because there's a ton of people that are not binary. And in the old days, talk about Supreme Court getting into it. Thank you to the Jehovah Witness who legislated and changed it so that doctors can't just go in and adjust the sex of your child. They now have to tell you what they plan to do and get permission. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be that a doctor looked at a baby, and if it was a small penis, whacked it off, and off it went. Oh yeah, if it wasn't a certain size.
Back up here. When was that?
Not all that long ago.
Whoa.
Not all that long ago. So, there's a lot of stuff that we don't, and then the child was raised as female on the theory that the micro penis, the small penis, would create embarrassment for a boy, but a girl could function. And so internally that person might be male.
God.
Oh yeah, it's a much muddier mess than 90% of the population has any idea. And a couple of things. There's a program in Judaism called Keshet, which does a lot of education about LGBTQ. I don't know, I guess it's just a function of my life. I have a lot of contact with a variety of people throughout the spectrum. Wonderful people that are just human beings that are all over the spectrum. And when I ended up working on my psychology PhD, I did specialize in gender and orientation studies. So LGBTQ does happen to be one of the things about which I've studied. And the gamut is just very wide. And some people can be, not quote unquote binary, right? They can be bisexual and you'd never know it because they're not exercising it. Others are bisexual and they're choosing to do the lesbian or gay side because that's who they happen to meet and were attracted to. But, and for those individuals, yes, we could say it's a choice. But for the folks that are not bi, then for them it's not a choice. They either are oriented to their own sex, their own gender, or they're not. And you can't tell your body what to alert to, what to get aroused to. Your body does that. And if there's a male out there who thinks they can tell their body what to do, I'll be surprised. Same is true with women. We just don't show it as much. Right? We hide it behind a bra and in our skirts. So you can't see what we're alerting to. And guys, either hide it inside their trousers or a briefcase. Right? Yeah, right.
Okay.
It's one of the uses of a briefcase. It doesn't show you what's happening.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Right. So, but that's part of the human reality. And, and to me, what God says is these are my children. I created all. I didn't create half of them and somebody else decided to do something. I created all. And I'm not about to tell God that God made a mistake. So God made them exactly how they are, with exactly how they're feeling. And it's up to us to find a way to treat them with dignity and with the respect and the free will to do. As long as they are not hurting somebody, then, and hurting doesn't mean walking with your male genitalia if you are female gender and you haven't done lower surgery and you still have male sex organs, but if you're female, then go in the stall, which is what they're going to do. Because as Stuart pointed out, there are not even urinals in a lady's. Actually, that's not true. There are some that have them, but they're still stalled. Women stall stall everything. And I think that stalling everything is in fact a really good solution. That allows you some privacy, and then among other things you won't have things that my brother got kicked out of school for, which is having a contest to see how high somebody can urinate.
Oh, God.
Right? Because you don't get into that if you're in a stall. Yeah, my mother really loved that phone call.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'll bet.
She had a few words for my brother about that one, about what's the proper usage of one's penis. not having contests of urination.
Yeah, that really.
So, and that's really the bottom line. Are we going to afford people the dignity to be who and what they are, and to find somebody whom they love and who hopefully loves them back? And isn't everybody entitled to that kind of happiness?
Well, I think what, and again, as Stuart mentioned, I come from the athletic side. What athletic directors are having a very difficult time with is dressing rooms, restrooms, and especially if it's like that world-class athlete, that a track star, that is one of the fastest men in the world, that's now racing as a woman and wants to be in the 2020 Olympics.
I think the Olympics are going to have to
huge shoulders. It's weird.
The Olympics has to deal with it, I think, a little bit differently, partially because there was fraud years ago, right, with that issue of men and women.
You bet.
But the other reality is that the differences between the top athletes, male and female, is not as significant as it once was. They're a whole lot closer and are going to probably get even more and more closer over time. And so it may not even be necessary to distinguish. Maybe you just compete, period. Right. The original reason for separating it was the idea that women weren't able to compete at a male level. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
I know we had an incident at Dodger Stadium where I think the softball pitcher's name was Jeannie Finch, and she faced three of the best Dodger hitters in the lineup. And none of them even touched a ball. It was amazing. She struck them all out. Yeah. And of course, Tommy Lasorda was going crazy and having a great time with it. But, and that was years ago. And you look at, I look at some of the ladies at IRSC, and they can throw a softball almost as fast as, if not as fast as, a pitcher would throw a baseball.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Now that we're allowing females to athletically develop their bodies, we're going to see less and less difference, right? We're not crippling women as we were many years ago. And there's a big difference, right? So, I wanted to be a pilot for a long time in the military, and in order to be a pilot, you had to be able to do chin-ups. And women are not supposed to be able to do chin-ups.
Wait a minute. Why? What? Wait a minute.
There's a lot of arbitrary rules for pilots that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a whole nother show, and we could probably do the whole show.
Sounds like 10 shows.
On crazy. They had physical standing heights, not sitting heights. Now, and my argument to that one used to be, when was the last time you flew an airplane standing up?
Yeah.
All right. And I was measured into a cockpit and fit, but I didn't stand tall enough.
Oh boy.
Yeah, by a half an inch.
You would fit perfectly into a jet.
I fit very, very fine into a jet, and I have flown commercial jets, so yeah. And I have had my stick on a few military jets, but that's as a second person, with a pilot in command watching what I did. But yeah, no, I'm not afraid of it because I've done thousands of hours of flying. Airplanes operate under very basic premises. You pull up, they go up. Unless you pull too far, in which case they go down rather abruptly. But so I actually did chin-ups, and I found that I enjoyed it. I do leg pressing. I bet you I can, even today, out of shape as I am right now. last time and I've got a video on my phone I can show you here in Port St. Lucie, leg pressing a little over 500 pounds. So, as I tell people, don't get on the business end of my foot.
Okay.
All right. So, and I understand that I have Jerry from Fort Pierce on line 1. Thank you for calling, Jerry. Go ahead. This is Ask a Rabbi.
Thank you for taking my question, Rabbi. Good morning, Greg.
Morning.
I was wondering, in Michigan, they teach that we're born with 46 chromosomes. In the rest of the country, they teach 23 pairs, but it means the same thing. And in Michigan, they teach that the configuration of one of the last chromosomes determines your gender, and they mentioned the dog leg configuration. And I just wondered if which gender that configuration represents. And I was also wondering about the term, polymorphously perverse. In other words, the ability to experience a sexual sensation. And as you get older, you lose that ability. And I would like to listen off air, if that'd be okay.
Sure, absolutely, right. Jerry. Okay, so Jerry said that in Michigan, they are taught that you are born with 46 chromosomes, which is the 23 pairs. And it's the last pair, Jerry, that's called the XY chromosomes. The X is a larger chromosome and Y is a smaller. So that's probably the one they're calling the dog leg. And that's probably an illusion because if you have a Y chromosome, you're considered sexually male, and that's sex, not gender. Right? Sex is your male or femaleness of being born, and cis is your birth sex. So that last pair of chromosomes sometimes is not 2. It's never 1, but it's sometimes more than 2. And
whoa, wait a minute.
What? Well, there are lots of chromosomes that bring along extra material here and there. We think of it, and you're taught in the book, this beautiful picture of these nice orderly chromosomes. That's not reality. The reality is bits and pieces of this and that, and it's not these cute little perfect helixes. It's permutations thereof. And as I mentioned earlier, you can be XXY, you can be XYY, and if there's a Y present, you are considered male. Sometimes that has to be determined by doing a DNA analysis. It's not necessarily obvious by what genitalia a baby presents, because there's more to it than just the chromosomes. But if a Y chromosome is present, the baby is normally assigned a male sex, and if it's not present, they're assigned a female sex. So, but again, and as I mentioned earlier, then there's the micropenis issues. There's a number of other anomalies. Anomalies is not the right word. Variations in the human spectrum on those chromosomes and on the presentation of genitalia. We know that some people are born with both and present with both, and then the doctor and sometimes now the family makes a decision as to what they're going to do with the baby. And that's going to have, in our society, unfortunately, very dramatic effects on the opportunities and the choices available to a child. And, that's almost tragic, because they don't have enough information on day one of a child's life to really make that decision. But those decisions are often made at that stage. And so if the wrong decision is made when a child presents with both, don't they have a right to shift it once they recognize what really fits for them? Right? And
one would think so.
One would think that would be simply human dignity.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. There's so many more questions than there are answers today. And orientation, again, is totally separate. Because somebody's transgender, let's say that somebody is born male and identify as female. And so they change their gender. They go through the license plate, they go through the surgeries and what have you, and they now identify as a woman. Okay? And I've totally lost where I was going with that.
Well, and you've got a situation in the wonderful world of TMZ where Bruce Jenner is now talking about coming back.
Well, and sometimes that happens, right? People discover after
weird.
Well, that's part of why we don't make that a quick and easy process, because we want people to be really sure that that's what they want. And sometimes they find that it's just really, really hard in our society to be a woman. And sometimes it's really, really hard to be transgender, especially if you're out there like he was. What I was talking about was orientation. Okay, so let's say that you now identify as a woman. That has nothing to do with what sex attracts you for sex. Okay? Just because you let's say you're born male and you trans to a woman, you may be attracted to women. You might even be attracted to trans women. The attractions are God's mystery. Right? So orientation has nothing to do with gender identity. They're two different things. One is an orientation. What makes my body go, yeah, right? What is it? And my father was a healthy heterosexual. When my mother and father would walk down the street, if a beautiful woman walked opposing traffic, my father reacted because he saw a beautiful woman. And my mother was always okay with that because she recognized that it was his body responding, not him. Right.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah.
She actually had
I get it.
She had a cute saying for him. She used to say to him, "You can window shop anywhere you want, just buy it home."
Yes.
So she was really very cool with it. And I recognize that not everybody is, but he was a healthy male when he was living. God love him. But and that he didn't control that. He didn't say to his penis and the rest of his body, alert. Right? I choose that you alert to this gender. That's not how it works. Your body responds to who it responds to.
Okay.
And and hopefully the being to whom you react has a mutual reaction back, because it's when they're not that's when the challenges come. But your body has, as far as sexual arousal, has its own mind. And it's not going to listen to you or anybody else. So
when do all these major questions come to the forefront?
For people who don't quite fit the norm, usually pretty early.
You talking high school?
Before high school, earlier,
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
A lot of kids will realize that that the pieces don't fit. Either the orientation, obviously, the sexual orientation starts to really occur as you hit puberty and you start to be able to react. Before that, you look at a 3-year-old and they're running around nude. They don't care, right? To them, it doesn't mean anything. But at some point, when you start to, and it's I think getting a little better now, and kids in school are, at least the college students that I work with are much more, what do you bring to the table than what's your sex or what's your gender than I think their parents are. In general, the kids are much better about it because they're being exposed to more choices. The Dick and Jane books were not very good at presenting, right?
Yes. Pretty basic stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's more than just even basic. Look at Snow White. Right? Look at what Snow White tells a young girl that a woman should be. Men can be grumpy old dwarfs.
Yes.
right, and think they're sexy, right? But a woman has to be this childlike domestic servant. Yeah.
And pristine.
And always has her makeup and her hair just so.
Yeah.
But it's also very childlike. You know, the Disney princesses really, really genderize. Now, Disney has realized more recently how bad that gentrification was. And so we're seeing a shift in the princesses of the more recent, right? We see women.
Well, now, wasn't that the mores of the generations that those movies came out in? Boy, that's terrible English.
Yeah, we won't even touch that. We won't even go there.
Oh.
But you know, no.
No? Okay.
No, I think that Disney actually reflected of small groups' opinions and projected that onto the, yeah. I mean, let's look at Belle and Gaston. You really want to see something horrible?
I don't even. What is that?
Belle, it's a Prince Charming, quote unquote, and
gotcha, and
a princess.
Disney,
Yeah.
okay.
It's a story. Gaston is Mr. Macho. He slams people around. He picks up his best friend and throws him against a wall. He corners people. He walks into Belle's house without being invited, and he corners her against a wall. And she's terrified of him. For
this
physical,
is a kids movie?
This is a kids movie. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Google Disney gender.
Yeah, I will.
And
I will after the show. This is a while.
Gaston is absolutely horrible. Beauty and the Beast. A woman should stay in an abusive relationship, right? Because the Beast is not nice. It'd be different if he was nice and just looked like a beast. You know, that's how I would have liked that to be. But instead, he really is a beast, and she's supposed to stay with him because that's what good women do. No, Disney has really pumped a bunch of garbage into our children's heads as far as gentrification. And a lot of people don't even realize that. You know, people think Gaston is cool. He's a horrible character. He's narcissistic. He might even be a psychopath.
You could be a politician.
Never, we won't go there. Right. But, you know, you look at those and the kids think, oh, that's really cool. That's what a guy should be. No, I'm sorry. Running around smacking people and being abusive to your love partner is not exactly, to me, a role model. And, you know, that he's physically attractive because he's supposed to be really good looking. And, you know, no, that's, I'm sorry. That's just not the kind of role model you want. Right. And then we've got other little things, other little subtle things like the mermaid who has to give up her voice in order to get her man. You know, and the song where she gives up her voice, you know, the antagonist says to her, you know, you don't need it. You've got your body language. You've got your looks. What more do you need? Besides, men don't like a woman who talks.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry. Right. And even let's look at dolls. Look at dolls versus action figures.
Barbie?
Well, Barbie and even the Revlon doll that I loved as a kid, which was at least a little more anatomically proportionate. But, you know, what does a doll do? It sits there in your hand and you dress it and you play with it, and it's completely passive. It can't do anything other than what, right? And you compare that to, say, an action doll, or an action figure, excuse me, we don't call them dolls, right? Because the guys have them. Action figures, they become, you know, jet planes, and right, they do all kinds of things. They're not this passive little, you know, Barbie doll, Raggedy Ann kind of thing. It's much more subtle than people begin to realize. Gender has been horribly packaged and marketed in America. And, you know, Annie Oakley would not have worked in the Disney princess model.
Okay, but you look at a lot of the movies in the 40s and 50s, and
You have that garbage coming in.
yeah, yes, I mean you really do.
So there was a reason for it, which was to get the women out of the workplace so that the returning vets would have jobs.
Whoa.
Yeah. During the war, women went into the workplace.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? Rosie the Riveter.
Rosie, yeah.
Rosie the Riveter, and she wasn't at all alone. Right? Women have always worked. They always have, and they've always run shops and inns and things like that. And having worked as a florist, let me tell you that am not cute, delicate work. That's big, heavy bags and boxes and
Sure.
and lots of stuff and really cute knives. Yeah, roses take really sharp knives. And that's just one of the flowers that needs a sharp knife to work with. And so it's not really a delicate, we think of that as a delicate profession. It's not delicate at all. And there was a conscious effort with the returning veterans coming out of World War II. There was a recognition that if they didn't find jobs for them, there would be this large population that would be very unhappy and hard to manage. And so there was a concerted effort to push women out of the workforce and into the home to make room for these men. And that's the beginning of a lot of gentrification. If you look at a Legos ad, Google Legos ads 1950, you'll see boys and girls standing around a table together building things with Legos. And the little girl is in, slacks and a shirt. She's dressed pretty much like the boys, just a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
A kid in
they're both playing with Legos.
They're playing with Legos.
Yeah.
It's nothing exotic. They're just around a table building hospitals and whatever they're building. You look at a Legos ad, from 10 years ago, and the girls have beauty shops and my friends, and the boys are building vehicles and buildings and yeah. And you ready for why?
No clue now.
Because Legos can sell 40% more sets if they genderfy them. Because if you have two kids in your household and you have a boy and
You're
a girl,
going to buy two sets.
you're going to buy two sets. Whereas if they're unisex, you could buy one and they both could share it. Now, in my house, I would have bought two because, they could build bigger things. But, from Lego's point of view, it increases their sales by 40%. When Dove came out with Dove for Men, that was to increase. They didn't change the soap. All they did was square the corners a little bit.
Right.
And, that was aimed at increasing their sales.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just think it all started with Ozzie and Harriet. Oh.
That's it. There's a lot of really strange stuff out there. And it's, yeah. Well, yeah. The whole movie censor thing is kind of funny because being Jewish, I understand the Yiddish that the censors never cut out of the movies. And some of that's hysterically funny. And, the censors clearly didn't speak Yiddish, or they didn't think the population did.
Well, I think a lot of the censors were Jewish.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, at least some
Some
of
of
them
them?
that I knew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then they let the Yiddish just
Oh,
go.
sure. Yeah, I mean, but that
Yeah.
was very common in L.A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can I say?
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein comes to mind.
Oh,
Not
God.
Bride of Frankenstein, or young Frankenstein. Yeah.
Oh, Mel Brooks.
Well, I'm thinking of Madeline Kahn, and her lines.
Sure. Yeah.
She's oh gosh, she is something else. And but yeah, so gentrification is an interesting thing. So
It's deep.
It is
It's
deep.
really deep.
It is deep. But again, I'm going to come back to where I started with, which is that God doesn't make junk. We are all human beings. And yes, the founders of our country said all men are created equal, and they had a very different definition of man than I do. But I'm going to say it was a work in progress, as Stuart would say. You're incrementally improving it, and so we now include all human beings in that all men are equal, except that we really don't. We still make exceptions. But we have an amendment that says all are entitled to equal protection under the law.
Mm-hmm.
And that really does mean that we need to treat human beings as human beings. Period.
Well, one would think that would be common sense.
Oh, yeah, well, but some pigs are more equal than others. Good old George Orwell, right?
Yeah, I think I've heard that before. Yes.
Yes. Well,
1984. all over again.
1984. Yeah, I actually, 1984 is not even, that's one thing. That's more about supervision. And yes, that is kind of an interesting comment. But Animal Farm is the one I was thinking of. Right, his novella Animal Farm, written in 1944, 46, something like that.
No, it'd have to be
Long time
somewhere
ago.
around there.
Right, very long time ago. And kids read it in school, but they really need to read it as adults again. There's a couple of really good lines in there. Right, some are more equal than others. That sense of entitlement or whatever, whatever it is that drives people to think they're more entitled to something than somebody else is, for any reason, is just mind-boggling. We're entitled to a good, basic, fair shot at life. And that means not handicapping a chunk of the population, even if it's a small chunk, even if it's a minority.
But if you look back at, like, a lot of indigenous people, that was not an equal society either.
Well,
anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I mean, an equal society is a work in progress, right? One of the things that I liked in Tucson was a program called Unlearning Racism, which was a constant reminder that even I, as I sit here and talk, still have racism or some isms that still need to be brought to light and worked on.
Well, certainly less than most people. Now, was this at the U of A?
No, that was actually just in the community.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So there's a couple of really good programs. I wish I could get them started here someday. So Sharon's saying to me, "What do you want to say to straights who want a straight parade? They're welcome to march straightly." I don't That's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, yeah.
Yeah, it sure is.
Straights are not under attack, but their racism is. Their sexism is. So here's another last piece, and this will probably take us the last 10 minutes. Transgender wouldn't be a big issue if women had equality. It's the non-equality between the sexes that creates a big part of the undercurrent in transgender. As in, why would a man want to go to where he can't play softball? Right? Why would you want to become lesser? Why would you want to get paid 70% of what a man makes for the same work? Why would you want to, identify with that group that doesn't have really good brains and is over-emotional? Yeah. And and conversely, and in fact, women who want to identify as men, are more accepted than men who want to as males who want to identify as women. because of that. Because of there's a total lack of ability to understand why somebody would want to go to that worse, that lesser sex. For a woman, for a female to want to be a man, that's much more acceptable in our society because that's climbing, that's going up. And so, what that person's trying to do is to achieve equality in some way. Yeah.
The glass ceiling.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. And people are wherever they are along the spectrum. That's really the bottom line. And, are there people who are going to abuse? Yeah, there's people who are going to abuse anything and everything. And I think the important thing for society and for leaders in society to do is to weed out the deception, find the bad actors, and don't let them get away with it. But it's not because any part of this is good or bad. It's just what is.
But what if these people continue to do that in the name of religion?
To do what? To abuse something?
Yeah.
It's an invitation to really learn what their religion is saying. So I'm going to invite everybody, come to Yom Kippur at Congregation Eitz Chayim, and I will specifically talk about those lines in Leviticus because they don't mean what they have been taken to mean. Ooh. Yeah, that's a very bad understanding of that text in Leviticus, and it's part of the Yom Kippur reading, and so I always talk about it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't. In 6 minutes, we do not begin to have a chance to talk about that. We'll do that another show. But yeah, no, it's out of my Judaism that I understand God doesn't make junk. What kind of a God would condemn somebody to a life of hell on earth? Right? Yeah. That would be a really hard God for me to relate to. And so, I'm going to take the ancient rabbis' teaching that the trials in our life are opportunities for us to learn and to grow. And when we do that, then we earn blessings and love. And so we can do that. We can step forward and start to recognize that all of God's creation, not part of it, but all of it is God's creation. And that includes being humane in our treatment of animals. Right? That extends to everything. And, are there people who are going to be psychopaths? Yes, unfortunately. What can we do to fix that? That's a whole nother show. And that's not my specialty, so I'm not going to go very deep in it. But, we can work with people. We can help them be their best selves. And I think that most people want to be their best selves, even psychopaths. You just have to frame it differently. All right, and hopefully you can identify some of those folks early and put good interventions in. Because the longer they get into their habits, the longer they're there. And will there always be people who abuse others? Yeah, unfortunately there will be. But
that's what I don't understand.
Abusing somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately for some people, control and self-centeredness is at the heart of who and what they are, and they don't have good mechanisms for curbing themselves. And, again, if we as a society start to move off of this crazy place of arbitrarily being obnoxious to people, to really starting to be more inclusive and recognizing all of God's creation as part of God's creation, then hopefully we can learn to help those folks, not to be safer. Mm-hmm. Safer for themselves, safer for their children, safer for those that they claim to love. And, because that's just it's some bad learning, it's some bad habits, it's a whole lot of stuff. And nobody's let me run the world, but I certainly hope that some people will hear some of this and start to move a little bit forward. And it's one of the reasons why I teach, because I want kids today that are growing up to be able to look at each other, as I said, most of them already start to, but I want to give them some tools to help them be able to articulate how and why they do that. And I spend a lot of my time on those kinds of energies. But I expose them to the gender issues in Disney, and I expose them to other stuff, depending on which class they're in. Not every class gets the Disney gender, but certainly development does, and some of the psychology stuff.
Do your kids in college seem to, if you want to say, get it?
They're much more open to
this generation.
This generation is much more open than their parents are. If I get a complaint, it's usually not from a student; it's usually from the parents of the student.
Yeah.
And sometimes what'll happen is that a parent will call me or give me a complaint, and then the kid will come quietly up to me and say, "That was my parents, not me." I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Someday the parents will grow up.
Yeah. Like I said, there was the one time where the parent called me and said, "My kid can't go to a mosque because they're Jewish," and I'm like, "So am I."
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt you. It's a house of God. And it's not a different God. It's one universe created by one God. It's not a different God. One universe, one creator. It can't be two of them. So that's a good place to end Ask a Rabbi, because I hope you've enjoyed it. Please give me a call sometime at 772-340-1590, or come visit me at Eitz Chayim, EITZCHAYIM.org. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb from Congregation Eitz Chayim. This has been Ask a Rabbi.
Well, what a doubleheader Friday. Holy smokes, Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie, WPSL.com, webcaster to the world, on Alexa and Google Home.